All right, are we good to go? Can everybody hear us? I don't know. I think I brought us out from backstage too quick. That might have been something that shows up on the video, or it might just show the intro video and then it shows us. I'm not quite sure how that works. But hello everybody. Glad to see y'all on a Sunday. I hope everybody's doing good. Everybody in chat, thank you very much for showing up and joining us. Squirrel, how you doing today? Misty. Oh, this is going to be fun.
I just answer.
It's the very first time she has to open her mouth and speak. She needs like the shove on the back to get her going, but then she'll get going. And so on this, I'm super excited to have this guy on. This is Eric Tipton, one of my good friends. And if you don't know who Eric Tipton and Kane Michael are, let me just start by saying, man, you're missing out, because these guys, they're some of the real deal kind of people that you don't hear a whole lot about. And it always blows my mind, if I mention them, like how many people aren't familiar with them and their research and what they've produced and all that kind of stuff. So, being that this is like only show number 3, I really wanted to get a certain amount of people on here in the beginning that, have legitimate, quite a bit of experience and everything. And anyway, so Eric, thank you for joining us, brother. I'm so glad to have you on here.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I really do.
So since, few people might not be overly familiar with you and your work and Kane and everything, and you have done some shows before, so I don't want you to have to rehash everything, but can you kind of like summarize like how you got into it, how you got started in the whole Bigfoot thing?
Sure, man. It's been a long journey. It's really for me. I mean, it was, and to put a date on it now, I really can't. But somewhere in the early 2000, I had a sighting that I believe was a sighting, and then I just kind of locked it away for many years. And then Kane and I met. Well, when I say many years, that's like when I had my sighting. I think it was like 2000, 2001 is when that happened. 2004, I started working for a certain mechanical company. That's when I met Kane. So I've known Kane since 2004. And then he and I, when you work large projects together, you kind of carpool with each other. And these projects can go anywhere from 9 months to almost 2 years sometimes on one project. So when you're carpooling with individuals like that, you get to know them. I mean, you work with them all day, you ride together. So throughout the course of, I was there maybe 2 or 3 years, and then Kane and I actually started working a project together. So we started riding with each other, and throughout that whole year, we really got to know each other, became friends, and I found out that we had the same beliefs in a lot of stuff. And I decided to go ahead and tell him what I saw, and he believed it, and we started from there. And then I think it was, so we started going out and really had nothing set in stone, didn't know what the hell we were doing at all. We just drive and hit an area and jump out of the truck, check our compasses, and shoot off into the woods. And we did that for 2 or 3 years. And along that way of doing that, we started taking notes. We started documenting certain things. And the first 2 years, we were traveling all over the place. And we started finding the same things all over. And we were strictly off trail, bushwhacking everywhere we went. trying to get in as far as we possibly could wherever we went. And then it was like, I think we were like maybe 2 years into it. He and I together had a huge encounter with something, and it was aggressive. It was very aggressive. So that became really our main focus. As okay, now we have a research area. We believed that what took place was in the same realm of the subject that we now study. Um, and then through the years, we were then started getting more encounters, collecting more data. And then I believe it was 16. 16 is when I had my encounter. And it was a full visual, front on visual daylight sighting, face to face with one. And that threw me into a slight depression for a while, because I didn't know what to do, even though he and I had been doing all this research together and going out and looking for this creature. When I came face to face with it, I didn't know how to process it. I truly did not know what to do with it, and it kind of shut me down mentally for a while. So gradually worked out of that, got back, 100% upstairs, and it changed a lot of things for me. It changed a lot of things for Kane and I both, and how we continue to do our research today. And so now we're just this is full on for us.
Did you say you've been around Kane for 18 years now?
Almost 20. Yeah. Yeah. Almost 20 years. Yeah.
How has that affected you mentally? Because there had to be some repercussions, right? It's
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just because wow, are you medicated over that, or
we've experienced, or we've tried certain things out there to keep us. Yeah.
I could see that because I know them. Let me ask you though, because I was hoping that eventually you would get around to the story of the one that came out that you actually got a good visual of, the one that walked out.
Mm-hmm.
You said, and I've heard you say this before, that you just, even though you were out there looking for him, you still just weren't prepared. Like you were prepared in the moment, I reckon, but after you had time to process it, it just kind of rocked your world and scrambled your brain a little bit. Can you talk about that a little bit? Do you feel comfortable going through what went through your head?
Yeah. So it was the adrenaline of, well, when I first looked up and I'd seen him, I froze. I mean, everything froze. My brain, everything froze. And then once he moved out of my sight and I took off running down the road, I tried to get another vantage point of him. But it was after he was gone, I realized he was gone. And that's when the adrenaline, I was full of adrenaline, but my mind, I could not process, because, and I've said this many times, that you start, your mind goes through this meltdown process of trying to figure out what it is you're looking at, because you're taught at such a young age, this is this is this, da 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 da, to identify things. So when you see it, your brain is trying to process at 100 miles an hour of what you're actually staring at. And a lot of people say, well, and I've heard this with many other people. I've seen people go, well, how come you got so much detail? Well, that's because your brain is picking up on everything that you're looking at, because it doesn't understand what you are looking at. So it's picking up on every little detail it possibly can. to process this and to create in your mind what exactly it is you're staring at. So once all of that went away, and I'm standing on the gravel road, I didn't know what to do. I could have laughed, and I've said this, I could have just started laughing. I could have dropped to the ground and just cried like a baby, honestly, because it was more validation of what I'd seen so many years ago, to everything that Ken and I had done throughout all these years, and then boom, here it is right in front of my face. So that night, we were actually camping at the campground with my wife and his girlfriend at the time. That whole night, all I could do was sit in front of the fire. I didn't really talk. I didn't really. I still was just, my brain was just scrambled. But then after a couple days went by, uh, I started like I started doubting religion. I started doubting. Uh, there were so many things that I had questions about that I didn't. But I didn't know how to ask questions, or with my beliefs, and how does this thing fall into to what I do believe in with religion and day to day and everything else, and the physicality of it, the size of it. It showed no aggression whatsoever. When it looked at me, it had this look like it had screwed up. He had screwed up. He had this like, oh crap look to his face. And I didn't know what to do, but it was the size of him. It was the mass of him was so large that then I started realizing I'm out here. I'm going in as deep as I go. I've been so close. What I feel, I've been so close to these things multiple times that if it wanted me, it just, and it terrified me. It terrified me to now know the size of this thing, and to know what I've been doing out there in the woods, and how close I felt I've been with these things, and what it could actually do to me if I did the wrong thing, not knowing how to approach these creatures, if you feel you're in an area with them, and what it could have done to me. And that in itself, I'm an avid hunter. I'm an avid hunter. I would not get out of my truck when I'd go hunting until I could see silhouette. Before, I'd be in my tree stand or my deer blind an hour before daybreak. I mean, well before the sun comes up. And then it went to me sitting in my truck waiting until I could see silhouette of trees and shit, or stuff. Sorry, and before I went out, and I forced myself. Finally, in my head, I was like, you know what, enough's enough. I'm not going to allow something to shut me down completely out of what I love, and what I love is nature. What I love is getting out there and hiking and everything that goes with it. And I forced myself. I went out by myself to that area, and it was like 4:30 in the morning when I got there, and I hiked in like 2.5 miles by myself, no headlamp on, no nothing, and I hiked in about 2.5 miles in the dark to the area that we research, and I sat there and just sat there and sat there. And that was the longest morning of my life. But that's what I had to do to break that in my mind. So now I have a totally different, I am so calm when I'm out there. I am so calm when certain things happen. I just have a different approach to things now.
Yeah. Uh, Before I dig in and start asking some questions, because I know everybody's going to ask, can you quickly kind of describe what it looked like, what you saw?
Sure, it was reddish brown. in color. With the rangefinder, Kane went out to the area after it disappeared, and we went back up to the bridge. And Kane went out to where it was, where I'd seen it, and I had my rangefinder, and I ranged him about 100 yards, just under 100 yards. We guesstimated with the rangefinder close to 10 foot tall. He was reddish brown. His skin was leathered, dark, leathered skin. And it wasn't until that time that I felt that they were nothing but an ape, just a North American ape, until I'd seen it. And once I'd seen it and seen its facial features, that changed that as well. That somewhere we share the DNA. And it had a very native, not like a strong native face, but the bone structure just automatically sent me to native look to it. No hair on its face, no hair on its chest, but everywhere else was covered. Now, from what I'd seen, when I ran down the road and I went to step into the marsh, I'm 6'1", and when I stepped in, the weeds in the marsh were up to my chest, and what I'd seen of him was from the waist up. So, and he is not, from what we have recorded, he is not the alpha out there either. His print that I have around the corner here on my wall, he's 18 and a half long and 9.5 wide, and we had actually found one bigger than him out there a few months later.
Man.
So you do think it's male, what you saying?
Yeah. I didn't see any breasts, anything like that. I believe it was a male.
Okay, I got an honest question. Did you shit yourself when you seen it?
No. I like I said, I there was absolutely,
because you always say that the more.
No, right. But I had nothing running. Kane was actually, so he was sitting on the guardrail of the bridge, and it's a channel that the channel runs through this marshland, and he actually had his back turned toward it. He was facing me on the bridge, and I'm sitting there staring at it, froze, and he's still talking. He has no clue.
Behind him?
Yeah, it was behind him, out in the marsh, looking at me, staring at me, and I'm staring at it, and Kane's talking, and next thing Kane knows, I'm running down the road. He has no clue what's going on. All he knows, and I could hear him as I'm running down the road. I can hear Kane grabbing gear and everything, and all he knows is we're running. That's all he knows. We're running.
Time to go.
Time to go, man.
I'm going to be right there with you. If I see you running, I'm taking off too. There's got to be some reason.
Yeah. I don't have to know what we're running from. I just, if somebody I trust just takes off at a dead run, I'm going to. I'm ready. Yeah, I learned a long time ago, when you're in the woods and animals flee with them. If your friends flee with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'd trip Spencer though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You'd be bait. Sorry.
Yeah. Until that point in time, Kane had no clue how fast I really was, and it was after the fact he was like, "Man, I got to start doing more cardio."
and that's saying something, because if you ever go out with Kane, his little ass is like a mountain goat. He just goes and goes and goes and goes. He goes straight up hills. You get to whatever. You either follow him or he leaves you. He doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, if your mindset, like all at once, first of all, so in your opinion, they're not an ape. They're not just some dumb animal running around the woods, right? Otherwise, I mean, we'd have a lot more than we do now. There has to be, a larger level of intelligence in them than, just any other kind of animal. I mean, for the love of God, we got every kind of animal in the world. We've got it in a zoo or, you know, in a museum or something or whatnot. But these things remain so elusive. So if we narrow it down, we're like, okay, we don't think it's an ape anymore. We think it's got some, you know, it's something else. We don't know what, but it's not a dumb animal, right? And then you've had so many experiences of possibly being right there with these things. You know, a couple of the ones that you've told me about, where you and Kane were down in there, and the things were, you know, trying to get you to go through the little squeeze spot and all that kind of stuff. You've been so close to them that, like you were saying, at any point, if they really wanted to get you, if they wanted to snatch you, they could have. And then you lay eyes on this thing that, you know, is, you know, obviously gigantic. And I mean, whenever that shit solidifies in your head, that you're looking at that thing and you're going, holy cow, this is what I've been in the woods with. This is what has been near me and everything. I mean, I completely believe you that would change your perspective on how you approach everything. I want to know, how did you force yourself after that? Like what was the conversation in your head that where you said, okay, you know, enough's enough. I'm gonna walk out there in the dark and sit there and make myself do this and get back in the, you know, get back in the woods and prove, you know, to myself that, you know, these things aren't, even though they're, you know, obviously they could get you, they're not intentionally out there trying to get you. How hard was that, man? That sounds rough to me.
Oh, I stood at my truck when the morning I went out there. I got out of my truck and I stood in front of my truck for I don't know, a good 15, 20 minutes, just, you know, man the hell up. This is but what was pushing me was, I need to know. I now I've seen it. I've seen it full on. I Now there's no doubt in my mind what we're looking for, everything that we've gathered. Now it's time to really do the research. If this is what I'm going to do, and this is what this is a passion, now I need to find I need to find answers. I need to find answers to this. So get out of your own head. Stop being a whatever, you know, and just do it. And that's what it was. And it took a minute. It took a minute, you know. And every little sound, I mean, every step I took, every little sound I heard, man, I would crouch, I would squat, I'd wait, I'd listen, I'd move a little more, I'd hear something else, I'd wait, it took a lot. It took a lot.
It'd be hard enough to go back in with Kane again or somebody else, let alone to go in by yourself. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I'd be absolutely terrified.
Yeah, it did. And I probably didn't go out for about 2 months. Kane was still going out by himself, you know, and doing certain things. And I didn't go out for like 2 months. And finally I was like, you know what? No. And that's when I took the drive by myself.
Well, first of all, that's because Kane's crazy. But anyway, so touching on something that you just said, where you said, you know, about like we have to get out of our minds and the way that we view these things. Something that I've heard you talk about quite a bit, and I think more people should pay attention to, in my opinion, is, you know, there's been so many times where I've asked you questions and you're like, no, you're thinking about it from a human point of view, you know, and you need to quit that habit, quit trying to understand these things, you know, with our type of logic. You want to touch on that just briefly, what you mean by all that?
Yeah, because we look at everything from a human standpoint. We look at everything of what we know and what makes sense to us. you have to get that, you have to stop that, and make that go away, and just look at everything simplified as the woods are my home. This is my home. I know my home. I know everything about this home. I don't have to think about anything why I'm here. I don't, and it's the same way out there with these creatures. They don't think about, they just move. They just do things. Any animal, does it. So we have to stop that process of, well, wait a minute, why would they do this when they should have done this, or this makes more sense doing it. Well, yeah, to me, as a human, it makes more sense if they was to do certain things a certain way. Once I stopped doing that and I just started walking and I started looking at little things, it was just, I got out of my own way, basically, is the easiest way I can say it. Is I just got out of my own way. I started looking at things as if I'm another creature in the woods, and I'm just walking, and I'm just living, day to day, no set times, no particular way of doing certain things. And I just move, fluidly through the woods, and naturally through the woods as any other creature would. And that's how I started looking at things when I started really looking at how to track these creatures. I've been tracking for many years. I was taught by two old heads that taught me a lot. And once I was able to move out of my own way and just start walking and observing the woods as if it's part of me, I started seeing different things. I started seeing things in the woods out of place to me, but not out of place to what actually lives there. And once you're able to do that, eventually it all just kind of falls into place with you.
So if you were talking to somebody brand new that wanted to get in this, first of all, I mean, I would ask them, are you sure you want to get in this? But if you were talking to somebody brand new on the subject, what would be, because like for people that have been out there and seen, like let's say you go to an area and you see tracks and possible structure, right? For a lot of people, first of all, a lot of people are just going to take a picture of that, post on Facebook, and that's it. They're Bigfoot experts right then and there. But if you didn't know, if you were looking at, let's say, a possible tree structure, and you're like, man, I don't know if this is legitimate, if this is natural. You sit there, you look at the stuff around it, you're going, did it fall down like this? Could it be natural? And you rule that out, and you truly think it was manipulation. You truly think it was possibly a Bigfoot. So, okay, you found an area where you have possible tracks and a possible structure. What do you think is the best way to tell somebody to go about, like, from that point on, how are they supposed to progress? If you were talking to a new person and they said, I think there are boogers in this spot, what would you tell them to be looking for and to document, just the stuff that you would tell someone new?
The first thing I would tell them is to learn how to identify a track first and foremost. 90 to I'll put a percentage on it that 90 to 95% of what we're seeing out here picture wise are people not understanding a bear, a large cat, and cat print can be huge, and even dog. And then you take a bear. Let's just go with bear. You take a bear, and he makes a step, and then he double steps,
Yes.
and then you take 3 or 4 days past that, and now here you come walking through. You take you take Mother Nature into consideration, you take wind, rain, sun, dry, everything into consideration, this impression in the ground will change in the course of 1 to 5 days. That impression will change. It will grow. It will change in depth size, depending on what it's stepping in. If it's stepping in marshy areas, if it's stepping in, soft grass area, it will change its size. It will grow. Some will grow. Some will get smaller. You have to know how to look at a double step bear print. You need to understand that the front paw, when the front paw comes down, that's, yes, it has weight to it, but it doesn't have the weight that the back paw has. The back paw is your weight. The back paw is what is giving the push. So when you look at a double stepped bear print, and you look at the mid dorsal, you look at where we believe the break would be on a Bigfoot. You may not see the claws on the back paw. You may not see those, but what you will see is you'll see a line, and you'll see a definite line in where we believe the break would be. Behind that, you'll see where it's stepped and pushed even farther down, giving the impression in the ground of that's the force pushing off the back leg to move forward. All of this comes into play. The way that it steps, a front paw is pigeon-toed, where a back paw, they are pigeon-toed as well, but not predominant as the front paw is. All of these things you have to look at. The way a bear will step on his outside paw. That's where his weight is here, not on the inside, on the outside. So when you look at the impression, all the weight is on the outside of their paws, not flat, not on the inside. It's going to be on the outside. He's pigeon-toed in. He's coming down at an angle where this is hitting first because he's pigeon-toed. There's where the weight is, and then he's rolling and he's taking a step. All these things you have to look at. So the first thing I would tell them is make sure you know the animals in the area, the known animals in the area. If there are bear in the area, understand bear prints. Go out online, study bear prints, study different ways of what they look like in different settings, different terrain. But understand how to look for a trackway first. First and foremost, this will take you. It took Kane and I about 3 years to legitimately understand that we are on a trackway of something other than known animals in the area. So learn how to identify that first and foremost. When it comes to the structures, yes, you look at Mother Nature. What was the weather like prior to you stepping in? The days prior to, the week prior to. Go back and look at the weather reports. Look at what was happening in that area. Look at the surrounding vegetation in the area. Look at the trees in the area. If you're looking at an X, are those trees or tree branches housed by the trees around you? If not, then you're definitely onto something. Look at the size of them. Measure the size of them. Measure the circumference. Measure the lengths of them. This is all data. This is all recorded data that you have to do. Measure everything. Look once again. Look at the trees. Look what type of tree it is. Look at the surrounding area. Is there any wind damage in the area? Are there other trees blown, bent, whatever? Did you have heavy snow prior to? Was it snow load? Just there's so much that goes into it, but recording everything, recording the area itself, writing down, I have, from the base of the trunk of the tree to the beginning of the bow is 36 inches. The bow itself is, 20 inches. And then the rest of it is this long. It's this big around. And then look at the other trees around it, even though they may not be bent and they're the same size. measure them. Are they the same length? If it's if it's obviously been put there and it's been uprooted, or it's a branch, two branches that have broke, look up. Look up. Look in the trees above you. Did they come crashing down? I actually physically witnessed an X structure being created by wind. I watched it. Two branches came off of two separate trees while I'm in my deer stand. Boom, fell over. Boom, fell over. And I'm sitting there in my tree stand, and I was like, "You got to be freaking kidding me! You have to be freaking kidding me! What I just saw." So it's a number of things, but I would say just learn how to establish a trackway. Learn Mother Nature and what Mother Nature can produce with all different seasons. Know how far away you are from human and human activity in the area coming through. Are you in an area where you just know that, look, nobody's coming back in here, I just traipsed through god awful crap to get here, things like that, to be able to rule out certain things. And then you circle it, go around it, go out 30 yards around and start looking for tracks. Go out 40 yards, 50 yards, around it, and just start looking at the what's there, if anything at all. These are the things that I did at the beginning. And when I say the beginning, it was 3 or 4 years that I was doing this, and going through and trying to learn how to establish, that wait a minute, I just went out 50 yards and I went around this thing, and now I'm finding, I'm looking at what I believe is an X structure that isn't human manipulation and isn't Mother Nature, nothing that shows where it was Mother Nature. And then I just went around it, and I'm 50 yards out from it, and now I'm finding a bow. Nothing around it is even the size of this tree. This is a little sapling. Everything else is mature, grown, huge. It's a tree itself, and it's bowed over. And then I start looking for impressions in the ground. 9 times out of 10, I don't find any impressions in the ground because this thing has been bowed for quite some time. So from there, I would do this exact same thing. And then I was drop pinning everything that I was finding. And then that's where I started seeing that, wait a minute, these things are starting to line up. I mean, if I'm walking in a straight line, these things are falling right in place with each other. Now,
what do you think they are, the structures? Why do you think they leave them? The X's,
oh boy.
From now, if you go from that time and you jump 2 years prior to now, this is where Cain had really stumbled on to something that was massive, and it changed our whole outlook on what we even thought they were. They are, well, certain ones are navigational. We know this to be fact. We know this to be fact because we recorded it. Cain recorded it. I recorded it. And then we went to 3 different other areas, two other areas in our state and 1 area out of our state. And we put what we found to the test, and it worked. And we recorded it. Now, not all structures have this in them. What certain X's are, we don't know. What certain bows are, we don't know. But we know that certain X's, certain bows, you can use for navigational. And this was just massive. So then we came back with all of this, and I told Cain, and this was during, like, towards the end of Corona and everything being shut down. And I went to Kane and I said, you know what? Let's take our tracking abilities, everything that I know and how to track, and put it away. Everything that you know, put it away, and let's where we know there is a trackway, let's start there, and let's go solely on what we had just found, and let's see if we can track these things just on what we have found. And we went for 5 days straight hiking. We left in the Hocking Hills down by Kane's house. We started at one point that we knew was part of a trackway, and from there we tracked for 5 days straight, threw the backpacks on our back, and we just went for 5 days straight solely on what we had just learned, and we did it. We tracked through these structures. We tracked for 5 days straight, and at the very last day is when we got what we believe was interaction from them. So, and we knew, being on a portion of the trackway that we had found and that we were studying, we knew we were going against them. We were going towards them. They would be coming our way. If they weren't coming through, they were coming towards us. So we wanted to head in the direction we knew that they were coming towards us. And on the fourth night, going into the fifth day, is when we got interaction and almost died.
Now, to a lot of people that are listening, who again haven't really, who maybe aren't overly familiar with you and Kane, you guys actually released some video of you doing this while you were doing this and everything. And also, you guys had spent enough time in this area that you had already at this point kind of established, like, you knew, like, if they could be coming towards you, you knew that that was a possibility going into it because you had seen other stuff over the past couple of years to kind of bring you to that, right?
Yeah,
So, like,
we knew that we had about a 5-day window of intersecting them. But we didn't know if we were starting a little prematurely in doing this, or if we were starting a little too late and they'd already passed. That we were still kind of not sure on. So, but yeah, we were almost narrowed down to time and date of when they would be coming through. So, and we narrowed it down to about a 5-day window of being able to hit these things at the right moment.
So in your opinion, in your experience with what you guys have spent years and years working on up there, do you think that there's a definite pattern to, like, the way that they travel? Can you talk about it any, if you have, like, come to conclusions on that?
Yeah. So even down where we go down in Kentucky, Kane and I had spent some off time down there, just he and I, and we were able to establish that they do travel in a circular motion like they do up here. How far out down there do they go? We don't know, but we do know that just by, like, starting here and tracking, and we were going counterclockwise down there, and then we'd stop once we hit a certain point. We were still on a trackway. We'd go back to camp, and then we journey this way, and we would establish a trackway, and we would follow it counterclockwise for a while, about 5 or 6 hours, and we would find certain things along the way, and then we'd stop and come back, and then we'd go to another area, and that actually led us to the very beginning of where so we knew that it was a counterclockwise circular motion, just like what we found up here. Up here was a little smaller in their travel circular, but so down there we had found that they were traveling in a counterclockwise motion as well.
How big roughly do you think the range was?
Down there, we probably were around 20 miles, 25 miles. from center of camp, and you go out to the first structure, and then it was like a 25-mile, radius around. Yeah.
Why haven't we found one? Why has nobody got proof of one yet? I mean, like legitimate.
Squirrel.
Hey, I'm not talking to you, Spencer. Me and Eric's talking about this. I have a good question. Now you tell me I don't talk enough, and I want to know these things.
But you're jumping right to the end. You're jumping right to the. You want to just end the show?
No, I'm not.
Eric, why don't you say that?
Eric, I got something right here. Let's talk about some cave systems. Now I want to talk about that too. So, what about that, or the mine shafts? Because not everybody has probably seen what you was talking about the other day.
Yeah. So one thing that and this was actually it's been a few years ago. I started toying around in my head because I have literally smelled what you hear so many people talk about, and it's that rotten egg, pungent. You want to puke, throw up. And I started thinking about it, and it gives that phosphorus gas, rotten egg smell. And I started thinking, and I'm like, what else produces this? And it came down to coal mines. It came down to the gas in mines. And I've been around. I mean, we have mines here in Ohio. I've been around them. I've smelled it outside of smelling it in the woods. And so I started thinking, like, they have to go somewhere. I said this on one of my videos that I know they make nests. We've documented one with everything that's going out in the Olympic project. We know that they create nests. We know this. But still, for them just to disappear, just plainly just disappear, they have to be going somewhere. So that's when I started looking at old mines, old abandoned mines. And here in Ohio, we're littered with them. And two of the areas that we research very heavily is underneath is nothing but just old abandoned coal mines, just all over the place. So I started looking at that, and I got on forums, and I started talking to people that actually go to these old abandoned mines, and they'll go into them and, whatever. And I started talking to individuals, and I started thinking that, this is a possibility. This is a great possibility. And I got, one of the guys reached out to me on one of the forums, and he knew, I asked him about an area, and he said, what you want to do is look for vent shafts. He said, because a lot of your vent shafts are, 6-8 inch, cast iron tubes that they drill down and for vents. But there are vent shafts out there that are big enough to where you can drop down inside them. And he said once they abandon them, they blow the front entrances of the caves or of the mines, or they'll seal them up, lock them up, whatever. But he said these vent shafts, he said they'll lay a steel plate over top of them, and then they'll put decent sized rocks, boulders on top of it, pile them up. And then you take, 70 years, 60 years of this thing being, abandoned, and the foliage grows over it, and they disappear. So you could be traveling through the woods and not even know that you're over top of a cave system or a coal old mine system. So this is something now that talking in these forums and talking to certain individuals, and then you can get maps of old coal mines in your area. And so I started getting those, and I started studying those. And what I'd found was in this one area, one of the main entrances is underwater now, so there's no way. This other entrance was blown, but now it's vent shafts. Now it's going out and trying to find these vent shafts. Who knows? But it's a possibility of this could be a way for them to travel, for one, and to just disappear and not be seen. if they choose to. So it's something that now that this year I will be pursuing this very hard this year.
See, that's what I think too. I think it's like cave systems or the, like you said, the mine shafts. I think they mostly probably stay underground and only come out if they're curious or looking for food or something like that. And they're everywhere. I mean, there is literally cave systems through the whole world. I mean, just people don't even have any idea how many caves there are that are just literally everywhere around them.
Oh, most definitely. And we know that the one area that we brought Mark and Larry and Cheryl up to, we know that area is strictly a travel route. There's no nesting. There's no, a long period of time of them just staying there. We know it is strictly just a travel route for them. But there is another area though that we feel, if we can find these old abandoned mines and find these shafts that we can get down into, this is an area where we actually found the nest. So if we can further that and we can find these vent shafts and get down inside them and kind of root around and not get eaten, we'll be all right.
If.
Yeah.
Well, Spencer's volunteering to go with you, so.
Oh yeah.
What do you think in your opinion, what do you think where you were just talking about like some areas, and I think this is a big thing that people conflate and get confused. I think a lot of people, like say for example, again, you got that new person that goes out and does find like possible tracks or possible structures. They may be under the impression that, oh, I got Bigfoot on my property and the boogers are just here and, I'm living with them. But then I see, a very small handful of people like you talking about like certain areas are most likely just travel corridors. Certain areas might be used more for like food, especially seasonal. If you're talking about like an apple orchard, for example, that's really only useful to a booger whenever it's producing apples and it's got food on it,
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think in your mind would differentiate like travel corridor type land from nesting type land from maybe hunkering down type land in the dead of winter, like where we just had that extreme cold, here a couple weeks ago? I mean, like in my head, I could see where like they would have certain areas that they just use predominantly to travel through, trying to get from point A to point B. They're moving through this location. And then they might have other areas that are like, whenever spring gets here and you're starting to get berries on bushes, maybe they're a little bit closer to these certain areas that are going to produce fruit, but it doesn't mean that they're staying there the whole time. What do you think is the big telltale things as far as like what they're using those areas for and like why they are picking the certain areas that they're picking for those things? Like a travel corridor, what do you think determines that they feel that they have to move through that area? Why, if there are people living there, why don't they just go completely around it and avoid people altogether?
The land itself could be large enough to where they can travel through undetected, but the land is not big enough though to where humans don't go in all parts of it.
Right.
So, and when you get into late fall through winter, there's no there's no way to really hide themselves in those types of areas. So it's a nighttime travel for them to get through that area. Now, so you take the one area that Kane and I researched for many years. It's 18,000 acres. It's one of I think it's actually the largest state park here. And actually, I think it's over 18,000, but for some reason that's sticking in my head. So let's go with 18,000 acres. Now, 80% of the 18,000 acres, well, 70% of it's public hunting. So, and then the rest is park. Even though you have 70% of it as hunting area, hunting land, you and I both know that, and even Misty knows that you're going in maybe 100 yards to your deer stand. You're not going to drag a deer that far. You know, if you go in farther, a hunter's not going to do that. And the terrain is rough. It's rough terrain. So you can get back in far enough, but there's still going to be humans there. And they know this because they use this area a lot to travel through. So they know that it is a human populated area, and they're traveling solely just strictly through the nighttime. Now, once late spring and now you're into summer, the foliage is up, the thickness is up. They can come in a little closer, you know, stay in the woods, come in though a little closer, because then you do get the berries, you do get all of that stuff as they're traveling through. They can pick through it. But what we had also found, even though they're traveling in a circumference, a counterclockwise circumference, you do have now trackways branching off of that and going over to other areas that we've also followed. These other areas are going into into large state national forests that are just massive. And that's where we found the nest. So now you're talking a much larger, vast area of wilderness, of woods. We don't have wilderness here. We have woods. But the acreage is just massive, massive. So those areas, those national parks, you can get into areas where humans are not going at all. They're simply not doing it. And these areas, though, are nasty, nasty areas. These areas are thick. It takes a long time to navigate through them when you're bushwhacking through them. Even when you're on a trackway, the bushwhacking through on a trackway takes a long, long time. But then you find yourself in an area that you're out there, and there is absolutely, I mean, you if you have service or whatever, and you pull it up on maps or whatever, and you can tell, you can see that there is absolutely nothing around you, and you know for a fact that there is nobody going through what you just came through to get to these areas. And those are the areas that's one of the areas where we had found the nest. It took a very long time to get there. We were banged up, beat up, scraped up, bleeding, and no exaggeration. And we found this nest. So going from a much smaller area, wooded area, like a state park, it's strictly just a come through, moving through area, and they're heading towards the much larger, like what we have found. All I can do is speak about what we have found up here, and it put us in the national park areas. But we had also found, though, we came out of one of these areas in the national park, and in Wayne National, we had came out of an area and into a private property, and it was a farm. Well, we were on the back side of this farm. We walked through a bean field that had already been plowed, harvested for the year, and then we walked into a patch of woods in the back part of this farm. And this patch of woods was maybe 40 or 50 acres. Now, something can live in there undetected forever, because that farmer may be 60, 70 years old. Nobody hunts it. Nobody does nothing with it. He himself, the farmer, hasn't been back in them woods in years. And animals know this. And animals know that they're comfortable there. They're not going to have any type of human activity come in on them. So they know this in certain areas, but they know that where we do research, there is the possibility of getting a lot of human activity back in these areas, even though it may be, very few and far between that you get somebody hiking back in these areas, bushwhacking back in. There's the possibility. I believe they know this, so they just strictly use it just for a travel route, and that's it.
when you talk about the nest, and I don't want you to, obviously I know you're not gonna go into anything that you don't want to, but when you talk about the nest, number one, do you think what are you calling a nest? Do you think it was something that the boogers are actually staying in, the full grown boogers? Do you think it's like a birthing area? What do you think the nest is? And number two, if where we were just discussing that, like maybe in extreme bad weather or maybe for whatever purpose they are going underground in the cave systems or whatnot, why do you think that they would put a nest out in the open as opposed to being like in a cave or even themselves digging like a burrow of some type? Why do you think there would be a nest out in the open? And also, on top of all that, do you think that it would speak to like possibly their birthing cycle? Like, do you think that it has anything to do with, hey, they had the nest out in the open during the nice weather part of the year, and they can go ahead and give birth, whenever it's in the summer and it's not brutally cold and everything. Does any of that, do you see any correlation between any of that, and what do you think the nests are?
I do. I think one is birthing, and the second one is what Kane and I theorized together, just he and I, that it was, and this was in the summertime when this nest was. We actually found this nest as it was being made when we found it. But one was birthing. The second one, the reason we believe this is from what we had found, but also injury. Not able to travel the way it
Oh,
should be able to because of injury. The reason we believe it was making the nest because of injury is where it was getting the pines to build the nest. Um, Kane had asked me to look at a couple of the tracks coming from this pine grove, or where it was gathering the branches down to the nest. And what I'd found and what he had found was he was it. I say he it was dragging its left leg. So once we found this, and I started retracing back from the pine grove and tracking it back to where it was building the nest, it would every other step, the left leg, the left impression would drag probably 3 or 4 steps, and then it would step normally and take like maybe 1 or 2 steps, but then it would go back to a drag again, which led me to believe something had happened to it. It's trying to walk normal for a few steps, realizes it can't, so it takes and the weight of the right impression was much deeper than the weight of the left as well. So that's when Kane was like, I wonder if this thing is building this nest because it's injured and it needs time. It needs time to be, and where we found, like I said, where we found this nest was, I mean, it was nasty, nasty stuff in the middle of this nasty crap that we had found this nest in. And but yeah, so the injury, being injured, is what we believe the nest was being created for. In my mind, I believe in birthing. If they're not going underground, or in cave systems or whatever, that it to me it would make sense. You would need something. I mean, animals do it. All animals, not all, but a lot of animals will make dens. They'll make nests for birthing, for housing young. So I put those two in what I feel nests are being created for.
that's like crazy the amount of thought you guys must have put into this to be like, hey, maybe the thing is injured. I mean, like
Mhm.
that wouldn't even cross my mind. But again, that's for me looking at it from a more rational human point of view. That would have never crossed my mind. And see, stuff like that is why, man, there are people like you and Kane out there that are doing this stuff and actually taking the time, to go through the steps and collect the data and everything. It blows my mind, some of the stuff that you guys, theorize about, and then not only theorize about it, but go out and try to find the evidence to back that up, to make sense of it and everything. Like whenever you were talking about earlier about, like, which I've heard you say it before, about like measure, like the bows and the structures and everything. How many people actually do that? I mean, you could, in the Bigfoot community, you could count it on one hand,
Mm-hmm.
just the amount of, man, it's crazy to me that you guys have opened your mind up so much that you're actually thinking of all this kind of stuff, and then you find like where it's dragging a foot. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, what was really, really cool about it was Kane had an awesome opportunity to be on a conference call with Amy Boo and with an individual from the Olympic Project and a couple others. And Kane and the gentleman from the Olympic Project started talking. And they started talking about the individual started talking about the nests out in the Olympics, and then Kane started talking about what we had found, and so they started going back and forth of okay, so what was the terrain like? And Kane started telling this individual, like, what the terrain was like and where we had found this nest and how it was positioned, where it was positioned. It was identical to what they had out there, identical. And Kane and I had never spoken to these individuals before, ever. And the other people that were on this conference call, it blew their minds that here you got West Coast and what they're finding, and you got two individuals over here almost on the East Coast, and they're talking about the exact same thing, and the nest being almost identical. And that was just wow. It was wow.
And not to give away anything, but they were talking about specifics that were matching up, weren't they?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And yeah. So what do you think they are? Why do you think, I mean, because obviously you've narrowed down to a large degree, like how to go about not necessarily finding them, but you've got a pretty good sense of what areas they would travel through, maybe even the time frame and everything. Certainly in y'all's own area, because you've spent just so many years now. And how many miles did you say that you guys have done in the woods? How many miles is it?
God, it's thousands of miles documented.
Stop keeping track of it, didn't you?
Yeah. Actually, Kane has the number. Kane has the exact number of how much we've done, and it's looking back on it. I mean, it's like, oh my God, there's no way. But then we start pulling stuff out, from the beginning all the way up till now, and everything's documented. It's thousands of miles, man, that we've documented. But one thing that we had to do, though, was once we were extremely confident that we could do this and that we could track these creatures and we could get in front of them. And I've said this before. I even mentioned it, I think, on the documentary, that I'm a little more closed-chested, or closed-chested with my stuff. And Kane had come to me and he said, look, we can do this, Eric. And he said, we need to show individuals that we can do this. So that in itself took about 3 or 4 months to decide on who we was going to bring up here. And if we had known you guys at that time, you guys would have been part of it. There's no question about that. But we knew Mark, we knew Larry, we knew Cheryl, and we decided to bring them up here to show them that this is possible, that you can do this. You can track these creatures. You can get in front of them as they come through. So that whole weekend, you've heard Mark and Larry talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So then I turned around to Kane, and after we did that, and I said, okay, so let's take it another step. I said, let's go to an area that neither one of us has ever stepped foot in before and show individuals that we can do this in an unknown location. And we just happened to get ready. We were getting ready for an outing. And I started looking at the topos and stuff like that I do prior to going. And I believe Mark and Larry were already there a day before us. So as we're traveling, now prior to that, I'd marked out certain areas that I wanted to look at on the maps. So on our way down, the following day, on our way down, Larry had texted us and said something like, "Hey, I found this, or this something he might have gotten it like an interaction, something happened." So I sent him a picture of the topo map that I had marked out, and I said, "Did it happen in one of these particular areas that I had circled?" And he said, "Yes, it most certainly did." So then once Kane and I got down there, the following day after we got down there, we had actually went out and went to one of the area, or to the area where Larry had the whatever took place. And in that area, we were able to establish a trackway, get on that trackway, started following that trackway, and then started getting interaction on that trackway as well. So, and all that we documented as well. It can be done. To those that don't believe it can be done, it can be done. We have 2 areas that we've recorded it in. It just, you need to take your time and learn. That's all it is. Just take the time and learn.
Now, I mean, I can personally say that, I've been with you a couple times whenever I've had, either an interaction one time possibly, or, where we found stuff that, in my opinion, nobody else has to own up to it. But in my opinion, I don't think it was natural. I do think it was, boogers having a hand in doing some of the stuff. I mean, the one, whenever you see a tree that's, pretty much completely horizontal, placed in other trees above your campsite, it wasn't there one time, then it's there, then it's gone. I mean, stuff like that to me, I'm like, damn, they picked the right spot, And again, that just speaks to, you must be doing something right if you're able to find these locations and go, I think, based off of what we've done before, that this looks like a good area. And then you go there. And I mean, one time we found where someone else, had been there. And I mean, I think, again, that just speaks to, you must be on to something with what you've learned and how you're able to look at it and say, and isolate certain areas and everything.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Before we move on to like anything else, if anybody has any questions specifically for Eric, put them in all caps if you would. It's easier to see. I was trying to highlight some of the stuff that people were saying. Greg House joined a little bit late. He was asking if you had mentioned the overall size of some of the tracks you were finding. Like what were the overall size of some of the tracks? Also, let me see if I can play this and if it will keep us up on the screen. There we go. I hope everybody can see that. There are some pictures in here of some of the stuff. And E, if you want to talk about any of these specifically, tell me and I'll try to like, pause it or whatnot. Because I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff. It's going to take me a little while.
So that right there, that led us to the nest. Those two impressions that you just saw, and with the black spray paint, that right there, that's what led us to the track. So what we were doing is we were taking biodegradable paint. And if you're in, and this really doesn't, I'm just taking a picture of the ground. But if you was to pan up and take a picture forward, you would be able to see 10 feet in front of you. That's how thick this area was. So, but what we found is if you spray impressions, look how it pulls it out of the ground. These impressions out of the ground. So these were roughly 12 to 13 inches long, normal. Size, what we would average a normal size. It was like 12, 13 inches. Now the left foot, that's what was dragging. And actually, it might be this picture. I've got another picture, though. This was one of them. This was one of the first ones that I saw where Kane thought he was injured or it was injured. Was the displacement versus the right foot. The way that it was holding its left foot on the ground. There was actually very little impression. There was very little weight put on that left foot. But then in front of it is when it started dragging. So that's what led us to believe that it was injured. But normally we're finding anything from 12 inches to 13 inches. This was actually, that right there was taken in the Adirondacks. We were, that there, I believe that one there was taken in the Adirondacks. We were hiking, we were maybe 7 hours into it and came up on this. Now, if you know the Adirondacks and you've ever been to the Adirondacks, it is just so we were about 7 hours into it and we came up on top of this flat area of this mountain and we had found this. Not quite sure what was building it, what was making it, what the intent of it was for. Not real sure. As far as I remember, I didn't find any impressions around it, anything like that. So time wise, now a couple of the bigger branches coming from the left and going up over top, the bottom of it was actually starting to rot. So we don't know how long it was actually there. Now I did rule out like me or you or somebody making a blind for hunting. It just didn't fall into that category of creating some sort of blind.
I could tell you as I'm looking at it, and as someone who has made quite a few debris huts and other natural survival type shelters and everything, and I mean I've helped instruct people on how to do it. None of this right here doesn't look like any type of method for creating a human structure for actually like helping you with exposure to the elements or anything. And I can't imagine a hunter gathering that much stuff just to sit on the ground out in an open area. Again, it doesn't make sense from a hunting point of view to spend that much time gathering just random twigs. I mean, whenever you can do it with a couple boughs of a pine tree or cedar or whatnot, and plus the location of it, if I was hunting, I wouldn't necessarily be sitting right out there in the open like that. I mean, to me, it doesn't look human, but that doesn't mean it's not.
Right. Now, I do know that this particular one here, we were like 2.5 to almost 3 miles from the closest road, and there was no farmstead. There was nothing like for miles from where we drop pin this.
Right.
But the closest road was like it was almost 3 miles to the closest road.
So again, if a guy was making it for a hunting blind and they did get, a decent sized deer, what are they going to do? They're going to drag it out for 3 miles.
Yeah.
I think you have to weigh all that stuff into it.
Yeah.
It's a good pick. Oh, why did I skip that? Play it again. Now that's something that a lot of us have seen right there.
So that's not being held up by anything other than the 2 branches below it in the middle. That right there, and I'll tell you right now, that right there is navigational. I will give you that. I will tell you that. That right there is navigational.
So you're able to look at something like that and doing whatever voodoo that you and Kane do, you can actually tell going from that roughly where to go to find something else. Just like you did in that one video. The one video that you guys released, you went from one structure to another structure to another. Something in this right here is giving you information that you figured out that tells you how to stay on their trackway or go to another structure or something like that.
Correct. Yeah. And once again, measure everything. Measure when you come up to something like this. The first thing you're doing when you come up to something like this is you're not walking directly on top of it. You're not coming. I was roughly 12 to 20 feet away from that when I zoomed in and took the picture. We do not walk directly up on top of something. We stop. We start looking around it. We'll circle it. We'll look around it first, and then we'll come up on it. But then start measuring everything. If you look to the bottom right corner, that's actually the top of the branch. So where the break is up on the top left corner. The one going from the bottom left corner up, that actually had a root system with it. Look at the surrounding trees that are in the picture. Those trees behind it were roughly 30 to 40 feet away. There's a little stream right on the other side of it, in front of it, on the back side of it. There's a little stream there. There's no trees around this within 20 to 30 feet around it. There's absolutely no trees. So the branches didn't fall. The tree from the bottom left corner that has the root system in it, it was not pulled or fell over from that spot. It was carried to that particular spot.
Whenever you say there are no trees around it, do you think does that lead you to believe that it's put out in the open so that it's easy to see for them, or do you think that they would know where it is anyway because they're following a certain pattern to get there?
They would know irregardless. Now, once again, then what we had found also, not with this particular one, but what we had found was we would come up to something like this and you could tell that it was extremely old. So, and then we would continue to track and we really wasn't finding, other things. So we would go back to that structure and then we would go to the left or to the right of it and we would go 30, 40, 50 yards out and we would find a fresh structure created, almost like they abandoned this trackway and now they've moved over 30, 40, 50 yards over and there was a fresh trackway that was created. Now, why the movement? Not quite sure. This particular print here, this took me probably about, that's another thing. Like anyone that goes out with Kane and I, if we get onto something like this and we start studying, you're going to be like, oh my God, let's go already. Because we'll be 2 or 3 hours staring at this thing on our hands and knees, looking at it for 2 or 3 hours to determine whether or not it's bear, human, washed out, whatever. This particular one, though, we had ruled out everything and come to the conclusion that it was a bipedal. Now, and I didn't take this picture initially, like as soon as we found it. Once we determined by looking at it and the area that we were in, how far we were in, and saying, okay, it's not bear, it isn't bear, it's not human, it's something other than. We had actually walked away from it. I continued. Mike was staying there. He was kind of looking at things around it, and I started moving forward. And I'd found another one, but it wasn't as predominant as this one. So I came back to I took a picture of the one I found, then I came back to this one. And that's when I snapped this pic. Now, this one here was down. No, this was in our research area. Yeah, this one here was. So there's another one I don't think I have on here, but we had found in the Ozarks that almost matched this identically. I mean, almost spitting image of this. So, but yeah.
Since we're sitting here looking at a picture of a track, let me just ask you your thoughts on people finding one or two tracks and then nothing. It's like the damn thing just disappears. I mean, I've found that before, but I chalk it up to me not being a very good tracker. Have you ever been on a trackway and had, some decent prints and then they're just gone?
Yeah. So if I'm tracking, and I come up to something as obvious as this, and I keep moving forward, and I find another one, but then I continue moving, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's nothing. I stop. That's my initial stop. I come back to the last track that I'd found, and then I start looking, just not far, but I start looking around it to see if there was a turn, if there was anything like that. Now, if I don't find anything like that, then obviously, I've lost my track. So I turn around, I go to move forward again, but now I'm looking at time of day. I'm looking at, what was the moisture content that day? Was the sun out all day that day? Did the leaves turn? What season is it? Is it a cold, moist day? Things like that. I look at the leaves. I look at the grass. I look at everything. Anything that would change what it's stepping in. If it's a dry day, you step in it, and it's a dry day. Within 2 hours, everything's going to come back to its natural state. For the most part, there will be an impression there, but everything's going to come back pretty much to its natural state. If it's a cold, moist day, or if it's early in the morning and there's dew on the ground, the impression is going to stay there a little longer. But as the sun's coming up, it's heating up. The dew starts to go away. Everything starts to come back. You look at the leaf litter. You look at anything and everything on the ground, the twigs, anything laying on the ground. You look at, was there movement, displacement of anything? And that takes a little while. I mean, it's nothing that we study all the time, and we're out there every single day learning how to be the top-notch tracker. I know some guys that are just will blow your mind on freaking tracking. But these are things that have been taught to me throughout the years. You got to look at everything. You have to look at, what the day is like, what the moisture content is, what the, sun out, not out, everything comes into play.
Yeah. I know a lot of pictures that look legitimate of like a booger track in the snow. It seems like, because it's snow as the substrate, it always seems like a long trackway. But then whenever you get in the woods, it's very easy, at least for me, in my experience, it's very easy for me to see something that looks like an impression and may find 1, 2, 3 of them, and then I just get lost in the leaf litter and everything. I don't know if they crawl, if they're going up trees. You know, I don't think that they're, you know, disappearing or going into a portal. I think there's a more natural explanation to it. I just was wondering if you had a lot of experience with that also, because I'll be damned.
Yeah, but I'll look at like, you know, I found a fallen tree that was massive. It was a huge oak that had fallen. I'm on a trackway. All of a sudden the track disappears. I'm standing there for almost a half an hour, like, where in the hell did this thing go? It just didn't disappear. Well, as I'm standing there and I'm looking around, I step up on top of this fallen tree. Well, I start walking this friggin' fallen tree, and then I get off of it, and right there's a track.
So it took the tree.
Yeah. Yeah. So it stepped up on the fallen tree, walked the tree as far as it could go, and then stepped back off of it. Do they do this all the time? I don't know. But in that incident, that's what it did. You know, this print right here, you can tell that this print right here, it was actually turning as it stepped. It was turning. His position moved. He went from tracking like what I would call a straight line, and then he turned to like a 20 to 30 degree on the left and continued traveling. You know, and you can see it by the displacement of the mud, where he twisted his foot on the top side of his impression. Look how much the mud is raised. Look at the toe impressions on the ground. Look at how wide the back heel is. Look how wide that is. It's almost as wide as the front. As he was stepping, he was turning, and he slid his foot. He positioned his foot on a turn. Look at the toes, the top two toes together, and look how now it looks like one big toe. It's two toes, but as he was turning, those two toes came together as he was making his turn.
You want to talk
that
about
right
that?
there? Yeah. So when we did the 5-day hike, we came up on this. This is on the video. This is one that was navigational as well. This was an unknown area to us. Now, at this particular time, we were 2 days in to the hike, almost three. Yeah, I think it was the third day. I'm sorry. This was on the third day. Now we're in an area that we never researched. Up to this point, we were strictly following, you know, certain structures. Once we found this is in the video. We're talking about it. Once the video shuts down, we spent maybe another 40 to 45 minutes on this thing. And once we determined what it was that we were looking at, we continued on and came up to another. Now, from here to the next structure was probably, mileage wise, I couldn't tell you. But from here to the next one was probably around, well, I know it was like around a 40-minute hike from this one to the next one.
That far?
Yeah.
So for 40 minutes, you were following a course based off of what this thing here told you.
Yes.
That's craziness.
Okay, you said you think that right there, or you know that is navigational. So I got a question about that, actually. Do you think it how do I explain this? The number of sticks or the certain way that it's how do you know which way to follow it? If that's navigational, like, I mean, I know this is going to be hard to explain, but just by looking at it, like, does, you know, because that actually, the way those are shaped, look like Viking symbols, you know, in the way that they're laid out. But I just didn't know if maybe you thought it was does the number of sticks matter? Do you count them, or is it the way they're laid out? Why?
Oh, we'll count everything. We'll definitely count everything. We'll measure everything in circumference, how thick it is, what the length is. We'll do all of that. We'll put all of that into it. And then there's another step.
There's another step he's not going to get into on here.
I'm just asking. Inquiring mothers want to know.
This was elevated. This one here was elevated off the ground, like 15, 16 inches elevated off the ground. It was horizontal off the ground, and it had it was just resting on two little trees on both sides of it, or two little trees on both sides of it, and then two broken sticks. So on the bottom left corner and the bottom right corner, there were two sticks shoved in the ground, holding the bottom right and bottom left up, and then the top right and top left were wedged in between two little branches coming off two little saplings, holding it up, and it was roughly 15, 16 inches off the ground.
And did you get anything from this? Did this tell you anything?
No. And this here, I mean, this was could it had fallen from somewhere, or this is one of those where you document it, you right. Collect what you can, and you just kind of put it away.
All right. That
home away from home.
For anybody, literally, the man, he lives to camp in freaking blizzard. he eats this shit up. He loves camping in the dead of winter, in snow, in rain.
Yeah. That was a fun outing. This one here, I determined that this here was Mother Nature. Simply because, as you can see, the trees in front of it, on the other side of it, nothing is damaged. There's very little trees falling over from anything else. But when I went down, if I was to make a hard right there, and I'd go down maybe 20, 30 yards down, then I got into the same size trees, saplings and whatever, and then I started seeing like other trees that were, you could clearly tell that it was wind that came through.
Okay.
But I put those pictures out there as well, This one here, this was also in the Adirondacks. What we had found in the Adirondacks is much larger in size than what we have here and other places that we've been to in the South. So size, huh?
I never find anything ginormous like I see pictures of.
Yeah. This was massive. I mean, pictures never give anything credit, unfortunately, but this was huge.
That's a creepy ass picture.
Huh?
There's something creepy about that picture.
I'll tell you what.
That's a creepy picture.
I'll tell you what. There's places in the Adirondacks that we were traipsing through, and you would just stop, and you would get chills up the back of your spine, and it was just nothing that had happened or anything like that. You would just stop, and you would just get this, feeling that you just aren't supposed to be there, and I can't explain it, but there's certain parts of the Adirondacks that we visited and went to and hiked through, and you just get this like, this isn't cool, man. We need to turn around. But this one here was massive. It was huge. And the impressions up there that we could see were big. Were freaking big.
Big as in like pushing 20 inches, over 20 inches?
Oh no, these things were like 20. I think the one that we found was like 26, 27 inches long and was like 14 inches wide. And I mean, and it wasn't like it'd been there a long time and weather had a play in it. It was hours. I mean, like hours old. And
so you were a couple hours behind something
Mm-hmm.
that left 20+ inch tracks.
Oh
And
yeah.
and you kept going. Of course you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not this boy.
That one there was on our hike in. I think one of the last trips we made down in Kentucky. This was on our hike in. And Spence, if there's somebody out there barefoot,
Yeah. If they were out there in that barefoot, I'd be damned.
Yeah.
They were tough. They hit different.
Yeah. And
Again,
a lot of people have that like flat, wide, Bigfoot print. And that's the way they all look. No, no, they don't all look like that. They range in size. The smallest print that I found was that big. It was no bigger than my cell phone.
The one that you actually have a casting of, that's really an unusual shape track.
Yeah, it's it was something had happened. It had injured itself at some point through its life, to where the little toe was pushed away from the rest of them, or it could have been born that way with the defect. I don't know. And I wish I could find it. Somebody had a cast. It was on a YouTube video I was watching, and somebody pulled out a cast, and it was almost identical to what I had. And the displacement of the little toe is what caught my eye, on this guy showing this cast, and the way that the little toe was pushed over and kind of crooked, like mine is, and it was crazy.
The cripple foot track has that displacement of the toe, but yours is just crazy. Your cast, is that why you cast that one? Because it was so unusual?
No, that was from my sighting.
Oh, that's the one from your sighting.
Yeah.
See if there. I think there's another picture in here of cast. Is this natural? Do you think that
No. This one here was definitely not the tree. That's a tree, going left to right. It's balanced. There's nothing holding it up on the left or right side. It is literally balancing. You could walk over and put your finger on it and just push, and that thing would sway like this. And the one on the right going up, that's broken on the bottom, that's wedged in between the branch going left to right. It goes up behind it and goes into a V of the tree that's actually standing. And then the one in front of it that goes all the way up, it actually had like a knot on the back side of it, to where the tree going left to right rested on it. So it kind of wedged itself between the broken branch and the long tree going up and down, and was balanced. Once again, there was absolutely nothing around this that indicated that it was fallen or it came down. Like I said, the one going left to right, it had a root system on the right side of it.
So it wasn't snapped. It still had the root system on it.
Yeah. This one here was just fallen, but I wanted to take a picture of it. Kane and I were standing there talking, and we were like, I wonder how many people would walk up to this and think, oh my God, it's an X structure, and it what we determined that it was just time and Mother Nature just
Now,
pushed them over.
again, if you're talking to that new person that's going out in the woods, what would you tell them about the X's to help them rule out which ones are intentional and which ones are just nature? Is there any kind of thing that you see over and over again about the way that the X's are done that makes you go, up, that's a booger, or go, wait, I think this is natural?
Not necessarily like I look more of the surroundings. I look at what is around it first to determine whether or not somebody did it or something did it versus Mother Nature. This area in itself had a lot of wind damage in it, had a lot of stuff blown over, had a lot of old rotted trees around it on the ground. The tree going from bottom left up was a it was rotted. It was standing at one point, but it was rotted at the base, completely rotted. You could tell that it just over time and a wind just fell over. The one on the right, going across the front of it, at the bottom of it, the exact same thing. It was, I mean, it was just completely rotted away. There was nothing. It was just dead. It was just an old dead tree that eventually just fell. And it probably fell the same time the other one did. The force of the other one could have hit it and just dropped it over. But I look mainly of the surrounding area first and foremost, and what it looks like. What does the landscape look like when it comes to nature? And then I'll bring up, what the weather was like, the weeks prior, as far back as I can go, 10, 15 days prior, what was the weather like in that particular area. Now, when you get up to an area like that, and if say that thing was green as green could be, not with leaves, but still live, to a certain degree, then that's when you really start thinking. You start looking. I look at the root system. Say one of them has fallen over, but the root system is there. I look at the root system. How strong is that root system? Was it starting to weaken? Was it starting to rot prior to? If it's a strong root system and that thing's over like that, and there's nothing around it that is wind blowing or anything like that around it, then I start looking at, okay, something with force pushed this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're almost at 2 hours now, and I know a lot of people are gonna jump off once we hit that point anyway. Maybe at some point, because we've barely scratched the surface of the stuff that you could talk about. Maybe at some point we can get you back on here. If anybody has any last questions for Eric, get them up now in all caps, if you would, please. Is there anything specific you want to talk about, or any other secrets you want to give away before Misty jumps your ass and tries to get you to give away all the goods?
No, just keep doing what you guys are doing out there. There's no wrong answers to anything. It's all learning. Everything is learning. Documentation. Documentation. I can't stress that enough. Document everything you're doing. If you're going to put something out there in social media, make sure that you bring the diligence with it. Don't just throw a picture out there and call it, hey, look what they did. Look what it did. You don't know what it did. What brought you to that area? What led you up to that area? Have you been researching this area? What were your findings prior to said picture? If you're putting a picture out there, bring the diligence with it. I guarantee, and you've all seen this throughout time, you throw a picture out there, you get 100 comments. Some of them are like, oh, you're full of crap. Other ones are great picture, this and that, and nobody knowing what it actually caused it. If you do your diligence, though, and you put everything in there of what led you up to that, I guarantee your comments will be a lot smaller. You won't get as many comments because you've listed everything that led you up to that picture and then what your beliefs are of that picture. And then you'll find though that you'll start getting comments of people will like legitimately be asking questions to you. So just do the diligence with it. That's what research is.
Do they cloak?
Do they cloak? Well, all I can tell you is I don't know if they cloak or not, but I have been witness to having things, seeing things in the woods where I will, and I kind of contribute the two together. I put the two together where I have seen what people call an orb, and then I've watched that orb manifest, and I've seen it move, and then I've seen it disappear. And as soon as it's disappeared, something happens. Some sort of interaction with something happens. So was it one cloaking? Was it one coming out of a portal? Can I put the two together? Not at this time. I can't. I've had things happen just prior to seeing an orb. I've had where I thought I saw something, and you've had it happen where you'll be looking this way and you'll catch something and you'll turn and then you don't see it. But I've caught something where I thought I saw a large mass and I've turned and there's nothing there, and seconds later an orb will appear.
Okay, so most people associate the orbs with being supernatural. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, they either want to talk about Bigfoot or dogmen or supernatural. They don't want to associate that any of it can be tied together. Mm-hmm. But with seeing the orbs and things, before or after seeing a Bigfoot, are they manifesting into something different, or are they tied to the paranormal? I mean, that's
one of that's just I don't have enough really for me to say yes or no on that. But I've had enough of where I've witnessed things that have now started a thought process of, could it be a possibility? And if so, where do I begin? Where do you begin with even trying to research something like that? And that's something that's where I'm at now. Okay, if these things are together and they're one of the same, or if they're two separates but they're one of the same, where do we begin the research? So, and I've talked about this on a couple of my videos of, we're starting here with the research. We're starting here, and we need to start here. We're jumping in midstream and thinking we're going to solve the greatest mystery, and we need to know about the past first before we can even start looking forward. And I've been doing this for 12 years now, 13 years now, and I'm looking forward, always looking forward until recently. And then I started thinking, until I can look forward and keep moving forward, I need to know about the past. I need to know everything I can about these creatures from the beginning. Where's the origin? Where does the origin start? And so that's kind of part of my research now, and what I'm doing now is trying to collect as much data that I can and information that I can from the past, in hopes that once I start really digging into it and finding things from the past, that maybe then some things there will start tying into where I am now, to where then I can start moving forward.
Yeah, start a book from the center and see how much you know by the end of it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Squirrel.
I'm smart, Spencer, if you just listen to me sometimes.
Wow, that's impressive. Anyway, so if you can't tell, we could cover more. We could cover more. Yeah. we got to get Eric back on here at some point. We got to get the other part of the dynamic duo on here at some point so he can throw his stuff into it. Before I jump off here, let me say thank you very much to everybody that was in chat. Greatly appreciated it. If there was an episode to share, this is one of the ones that we need to share. There are people like Eric and Kane, Mark, Larry, Joe Pass, Chris Reinhardt, Mark Green. There are people like this that are actually getting out there in the woods. Obviously, members of the Olympic Project and stuff like that. In my opinion, you really need to take the time to sit down and listen to what they have to say on the subject. You don't have to agree with everything, but you know, if you're out there in the woods and you're putting in the time and the effort and you're trying to do something with this and actually, you know, find some legitimate answers to this, I think you do need to sit there and listen to the other people that are out there and what they have to say on the subject and see if any of it correlates with what you're finding or, maybe it's just a really, I mean, I heard 5, 6 things already tonight that I wouldn't have thought of, just by listening to him talk. And this is somebody that I know and I've been out with several times. So again, thank you everybody that was in the chat. Please check out Eric and Kane both do miscellaneous things on YouTube and Facebook. Kane has House of Enoch. Eric does a lot of live podcasts. He also has a YouTube channel. Or is your YouTube channel still going, Eric?
Yeah, I haven't touched it in a while, but it's Appalachia Bigfoot Explorer.
Right. So, I mean, jump on there and see if you can find that channel and go back and look at some of his older stuff. He presents a lot of information. Me and Kane both do. And if you will sit there and watch their stuff from the beginning, you would be amazed at how much inside baseball they actually do put out there. You just got to go through it all and pick up on it, and it's not the easiest thing to do. Check out Squatching Cowboy. Check out Mark Green with the Cedar Creek Bottoms Homestead Life thing. I got this nifty ass cup from them. I don't know if you can see it or not, but they sell cups and stuff like that. Check out Chris Reinhardt's Discover Sasquatch. Obviously, check out Beast TV. That's my home. And I'm going to try to end this thing with the outro video, but I'll probably screw it up. So, let me see if I can get this ready here. And see y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Swipe and steal.